0 In the depths of the Heavenly Medicine Mountain Range, in the ruins of the Heavenly Medicine Sect, just as the old man had said, he had waited for nearly half a month. The old man had no intention of making a move, so Yi Feng naturally didn't dare to make a move. Every day, he would sit on the ruins outside the square with a gloomy face. His eyes were like sharp blades, and he wished he could chop Xiao Yan into pieces. Xiao Yan sat cross-legged on the square, and didn't say a word. He had been staring at the two of them for half a month, and he couldn't help but feel a little frustrated. Less than a month had passed since the pill competition arrived. What the hell was this Star Sky tablet doing? Up until now, he hadn't picked a single herb. With these two men staring at him covetously, he didn't dare to leave. The old man seemed to be rather relaxed. Every day, he would stroll around the ruins. Besides not stepping into the square, his footprints were left behind in other places. According to the Xiao Ao, the old man's calmness was terrifying. Over half a month's time, Xiao Yan and the old man had also exchanged a few words. The old man had obtained the inheritance of old man Xing Luo in Middle Domain, which was why he had traveled so far. He had not come to the heaven to obtain the baptism of the law of God. His main purpose was to obtain a strand of monarch flame from the Star Luo stone cauldron. Yi Feng had a strange character. He spoke in an eccentric manner. Xiao Yan did not have a good impression of this fellow. After chatting with him for a while, he ignored him. However, the old man and the former were quite compatible. From their conversation, Xiao Yan had a rough idea of some things about Yi Feng. Unlike the old man, Yi Feng had obtained the inheritance of old man Xing Luo in Forest Domain. Back then, he had even ascended to the Saint Meteorite Mountain, hoping that he would be able to follow the old man. Unfortunately, he had returned with nothing. When he heard the name Saint Meteorite Mountain, Xiao Yan frowned and held back his anger. He couldn't help but jump. Wasn't this the place where his teacher had died? From Yi Feng's few words, Xiao Yan found out that his teacher had once obtained the inheritance of a descendant of the Heavenly Medicine Sect in Middle Domain. He belonged to the branch of the Star Luo pill art. In addition to Yi Tianxin's extraordinary talent, his skill in alchemy had improved tremendously, and he had become a famous master alchemist in the great world. In that case, he could also be considered as the descendant of the Star Luo pill sect. Just as Xiao Yan was about to lose his patience, 2 days later, the Star Luo stone cauldron behind him finally spread. Buzz! A crisp sound that sounded like the ringing of a yellow bell suddenly rang out and spread across the ruins of the valley. At the same time, within the enormous cauldron, thousands of fiery lights soared into the sky, forming mysterious patterns in the void. They covered the stars in the sky, as if the heavens and earth were sensing them. Endless stars moved together, and dazzling starlights emerged. They resonated with the fiery light, and for a moment, an unimaginable scene unfolded in the void like a painting scroll. The void seemed to have shattered. It absorbed the fiery light that filled the sky, as if heaven and earth had collapsed. The sky split apart. Seeing this sudden scene, Xiao Yan's expression changed instantly. He hurriedly looked at the Star Luo stone cauldron. Was he courting death? Was he afraid that the heavens wouldn't know that he had created such a huge commotion? The old man and Yi Feng were also startled. The latter shouted angrily, "Xiao, what did you do? None of us will be able to escape from the protectors of the heavens." Although the old man did not speak, his face was still extremely pale. He looked around vigilantly. If he sensed that something was wrong, he would leave immediately. How do I know what this old thing is doing? The changes in the void were clearly seen by everyone on the island. Xiao Yan's face turned ugly, and he couldn't help but curse. What did the Star Sky tablet do? It had been silent for half a month, and it gave him such a big surprise the moment it came out. Hey! While the few of them were panicking, a cold laugh suddenly sounded out. Yi Feng's scalp felt like it was going to explode. He looked around in a panic, but he didn't see a single heavenly guardian. Who is it? The old man's soul force surged out from all directions, but he also returned without any success. His expression was gloomy, and his hoarse voice was no longer as calm as before. Xiao Yan was slightly stunned. Then, he rushed to the front of the Star Luo stone cauldron and violently punched it. He did not care about the pain that came from his fist as he spoke fiercely. "Come out! Ha 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 ha! Finally, there are some signs of recovery." A joyful voice was heard from within the Star Luo stone cauldron. Then, the fire spread out and the Star Sky tablet leapt out from within. There was an unconcealable joy on its face. This is a good thing you did. Are you afraid that they won't discover it? Beside him, the Shao pointed at the great changes in the void and said while gnashing its teeth in anger. This. The star sky tablet shot a glance at the Shao, then looked at the void. Boundless fiery light and stars reflected each other. The sky split apart and swallowed the heavenly lightning and earthly fire, bringing about shocking changes. All of you have broken through to the Emperor cultivation, and a strange phenomenon has appeared behind you. I have already recovered my strength, so can't there be a strange phenomenon happening behind me? He sneered. The star sky tablet waved its huge hand, and the fiery light that filled the sky dissipated in an instant. All kinds of strange phenomena were dispersed, and the void returned to normal once again. This is the phenomenon of a holy object. Apart from the moon heavenly pen, those protectors can't sense it. If it wasn't for this place, you wouldn't have been able to see it either. With a casual wave of his hand, the star sky tablet's gaze paused. It looked at Yi Feng and the old man, and said with an ashen face, "What's wrong with you? Didn't you say that outsiders are not allowed to enter? Everything was just a false alarm." Xiao Yan said angrily, "They found this place, can I still stop them?" Anyway, they did not come in the square. While the two of them were conversing, the old man and Yi Feng also threw their gazes towards the star sky tablet. After learning the reason for the unusual phenomenon earlier, the two of them sighed in relief. "You came by yourself?" The star sky tablet frowned when he heard this. He looked at the old man and said with an expressionless face, "Do you have old man Xing Luo's inheritance in your hands?" That's right. The old man's heart shook wildly when he faced the star sky tablet. His spiritual strength surged wildly. However, he was unable to sense the aura of this fellow in front of him. He lifted his hand and a scroll was held in his hand as he spoke. The star sky tablet narrowed his eyes. He sighed after a long while. He turned to look at Yi Feng and said, "What about you?" Yi Feng's throat moved and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He raised his palm. There was a broken compass. The compass flashed with dim starlight from time to time, as if it was resonating with the thousands of stars in the sky. The star sky tablet remained expressionless when it saw the things in their hands. It did not say anything for a long time. This situation caused Xiao Yan to be speechless. It was difficult for him to voice out all his doubts at this moment. The old man took a deep breath and was about to speak when the star sky tablet suddenly looked at the two of them and spoke in a cold voice. "Since the two of you have come here and have old man Xing Luo's token, I will not let the two of you return empty-handed. I have more or less understood the star Luo stone cauldron. Ordinary heaven cauldrons can also be strengthened a little." Upon hearing the star sky tablet's words, Xiao Yan could not help but be shocked. Since when did this fellow have such good intentions? May I ask if the fantasy monarch giant spirit flame is still there to maintain the core of the formation in the star Luo stone cauldron? The old man's throat moved as he spoke in a deep voice. "It's gone. It has been absorbed by me," the star sky tablet said without hesitation. 1 inch absorbed. Hearing this, the old man's expression clearly froze. He gave the star sky tablet a fierce glare and was about to rush into the square to see what was going on. "I only treated you kindly because you have old man Xing Luo's token. If you don't know how to appreciate favors, this place will be your death ground." A cold expression flashed across the star sky tablet's eyes. It moved and arrived in front of the old man. There was no joking tone in its words. "The fantasy monarch giant spirit flame is ranked 18th beside the monarch flame. Can you absorb it in half a month's time?" The old man laughed coldly. His eyes were filled with killing intent. However, his footsteps tactfully came to a halt. "It's just a wisp of flame. I spent half a month's time. Do you think it's only used to absorb that thing?" The star sky tablet smiled disdainfully. It looked down at the old man and said, "The star Luo stone cauldron is the lifeline of the heavenly medicine sect. Do you believe that I can make the entire heavenly medicine sect kill you now?" The old man's expression changed the moment he said those words. It was a long time before he spoke in disbelief. You can control the star Luo stone cauldron now? You want to try?" The star sky tablet grinned and slowly extended its 5 fingers. In an instant, the origin chi shook, as if it was going to engulf the entire valley. "No, there's no need." When the old man saw this, the last hope in his heart immediately disappeared. He bitterly shook his head and then looked at the star sky tablet and said, Your Excellency just said that you have Old Man Xing Luo's token with you. Are you willing to help us strengthen the Heaven Cauldron? He waved his hand and the origin chi disappeared. The Star Sky Tablet nodded and said, I have once accepted his token. Since the two of you have his token, I naturally won't go back on my word. Young man, what do you say? The old man's expression changed. Then, he looked at Yi Feng. There was no longer any trace of emotion on his face. Since Senior has agreed to it, this young man naturally has nothing to say. Yi Feng was startled by the sudden eruption of the Star Sky Tablet. He let out a bitter laugh. He shook his head and said, when the Star Sky Tablet came out just now, the unusual phenomenon that the Star Sky Tablet had displayed was something that he was unable to forget at this moment. Currently, he was only thinking about how to preserve his life. As for the inheritance of Old Man Xing Luo, even without the interference of Xiao Yan and the Star Sky Tablet, he's no match for the old man. Thank you. The old man was expressionless. With a wave of his hand, a huge black golden cauldron landed on the ground with a majestic aura, causing the ground to tremble slightly. 4 heavenly cauldrons, dark light cauldrons. Whether or not it can become 5 days depends on you, my lord. The old man's expression was indifferent. Up until now, he had also accepted this result. Although the monarch flame was rare, 5 heavenly cauldron was also extremely rare. Moreover, even if he could refine the monarch flame before the pill competition, it would not be easy for him to master it overnight. A 5 heavenly cauldron might be better for him at present. 3-day cauldron, Dragon Realm Cauldron. Yi Feng gritted his teeth and took out his cauldron. It was a crimson-colored medicine cauldron. Its exterior was extremely beautiful and smooth, like a mirror. It was quite strange. Xiao Yan, who was in the square, could not help but exclaim in his heart when he saw the heaven cauldrons that the two of them took out. He then thought of the 9 dragons flame cauldron that Elder Yi had left behind. Although it was only a 5-day cauldron, the gap between it and the old man's 4-day cauldron could be seen with the naked eye. No wonder Elder Yi's strength was so great. Both of them only had a 5-day cauldron. It's easy to strengthen a 3-day cauldron to 4 days. It's quite difficult for you to strengthen it to 5 days in these 4 days. If you are not careful, it might be destroyed. Think about it carefully. Looking at the old man, the Star Sky Tablet said with a playful smile. Your Excellency, just try your best. Whether you succeed or not will depend on your luck. The old man said with an expressionless face. A stern expression flashed across his eyes as he spoke. He was also gambling. It would be great if he could succeed. However, if he failed, there was still a 4 heavenly cauldron beside him. The remaining time was sufficient for him to control it skillfully. All right. Upon hearing this, the Star Sky Tablet did not say anything else. With a wave of its hand, 2 heaven cauldrons suddenly floated up. Under the gazes of the few people, they fell into the Star Luo Stone Cauldron. The two of you can stand guard here. Whether you succeed or not, there will be news in half a month's time. The Star Sky Tablet smiled lightly. Then, it raised its hand and lifted Xiao Yan up into the air. It laughed loudly and said, You stinky brat, follow me in. The Star Sky Tablet brought the former and the Xiao Ao into the Star Luo Stone Cauldron before Xiao Yan could react after his voice sounded. When Yi Feng saw that Xiao Yan and the Xiao Ao were brought into the Star Luo Stone Cauldron by the Star Sky Tablet, he was stunned for a moment before his expression changed slightly. Without any hesitation, he rushed into the square and looked inside the Star Luo Stone Cauldron. However, he could only see a boundless fiery glow, except for vast lushness. Senior, this. Just as Yi Feng was about to call the old man over, the latter's flustered and exasperated voice resounded, This bastard. Bringing that brat in is likely related to the Fantasy Monarch Giant Spirit Flame. The Fantasy Monarch Giant Spirit Flame was not absorbed by him? Yi Feng frowned. He looked at the old man and asked in a puzzled manner. You don't need to think. What is the Star Luo Stone Cauldron? If it succeeds, it will be something comparable to an ancestral holy weapon. The Fantasy Monarch Giant Spirit Flame is only ranked 18th beside the Monarch Flame. Do you have the ability to become the axis of the Star Luo Stone Cauldron? The old man snorted coldly. He circled around the Star Luo Stone Cauldron once and spoke fiercely. You mean? Yi Feng was speechless for a moment. Although he had reached the monarch cultivation, he was like a newborn baby compared to the old man in front of him. He didn't know anything. The Fantasy Monarch Giant Spirit Flame is only an item that can keep the Star Luo Stone Cauldron from collapsing. There must be something more important in it. If that guy really absorbed the illusionary divine soul just now, the Star Luo Stone Cauldron wouldn't be wasted. At least, he wouldn't be able to control the Heavenly Medicine sect anymore. The old man stood firm and his tone was cold. Then why did you agree to strengthen the Heaven Cauldron earlier? Recalling the cowardly expression of the old man, Yi Feng was somewhat dissatisfied. Since this old thing knew that the Star Sky Tablet didn't absorb the Monarch Flame, why didn't he say it out loud? If you don't slap him to death, you can tell him when he comes out. Narrowing his eyes, the old man smiled coldly. It's not like you didn't see that spatial phenomenon. If it wasn't a sacred artifact, how could there have been such a phenomenon? Sacred artifact. Almost squeezing out these two words from between his teeth, Yi Feng took a deep breath, feeling slightly better instead. It turned out that Xiao Yan was able to defeat Heavenly Sovereign because of the help of the Saint Weapon. So, this matter is just pretending not to know about it, and it's over just like that? After a long time, Yi Feng opened his mouth again and probed. Although he was unwilling, there was nothing he could do. He really did not have the courage to do so when the old man was not born. The old man raised his eyelids slightly and didn't say anything. Seeing this, Yi Feng only thought that the old man had tacitly agreed. He sighed and shook his head, no longer saying anything. Inside the Star Luo Stone Cauldron, being forcefully brought here by the Star Sky Tablet, the scene in front of him stunned Xiao Yan, who was about to speak. The palm-sized Star Cauldron was now like a huge bronze cauldron that could hold up the sky. It carried the blue sky on its back. It was as if it was stepping on the vast earth. On the surface of the cauldron, various phenomena appeared, as if the entire world had been carved on it. It was all-encompassing. There were even a myriad of brilliant star diagrams. On top of the Star Cauldron, a wisp of ever-changing green-red flame was burning gently. In a trance, Xiao Yan seemed to see this wisp of flame grinning at him. The green-red flame revealed a pure smile like that of a baby. Xiao Yan stood still in a trance as he looked at the harmless smile on the green-red flame. That kind of smile made people feel warm. All the worries in his heart vanished when he saw this smile. Xiao Yan couldn't help but reach out his hand to touch the green-red flame. The smile on the green-red flame was even more pure and innocent. It took the initiative to approach Xiao Yan and accept his touch. Pa! Suddenly, the Star Sky Tablet slapped him. The Star Sky Tablet mercilessly hit Xiao Yan's arm, causing him to instantly wake up. The first thing he saw was a huge mouth of ferocious flames in front of him. His 5 fingers were not far from the mouth. Xiao Yan was shocked. He hurriedly retracted his hand. This thing could actually confuse his mind. Caught off guard, he almost fell into this fellow's trap. The Fantasy Monarch Giant Spirit Flame can create an illusion. Although it doesn't cause any harm to the human body, it will cause great damage to the mind. The Star Sky Tablet shot a glance at the green-red flame in front of him and said angrily, "This is the Fantasy Monarch Giant Spirit Flame? Didn't you absorb it?" Xiao Yan was stunned when he heard this. He looked at the fist-sized green-red flame in front of him and said, "What use do I have for this thing? Besides, I've told you before, I'll help you find a few monarch flames. Consider this the first one." The Star Sky Tablet snorted. Before Xiao Yan could say anything, it said in a deep voice, "However, before you absorb the Fantasy Monarch Giant Spirit Flames, help me do one thing first." "What?" Xiao Yan felt relieved in his heart. Immediately, he spoke without any hesitation. Although this fellow was extremely conceited, he was quite satisfied with what he had agreed to do. He thought that the Star Sky Tablet was just casually mentioning the matter of finding the Monarch Flame. It was unexpected that he had really placed it in his heart. "That is, give me your body." The Star Sky Tablet looked at Xiao Yan and suddenly laughed nastily. It extended its hand with a loud bang. Before the former could even react, the 5 fingers of the Star Sky Tablet had already pierced into Xiao Yan's chest like a sharp blade. "Who?" He suddenly recovered his senses. Xiao Yan's forehead was full of sweat. In front of him, the blue-red flame was slowly burning like a baby's smile. Beside him, the Star Sky Tablet, who was deep in thought, frowned angrily. He said coldly, "Can you calm down a little? I didn't bring you here to scare you." Xiao Yan was stunned for a while. He tried to hold back his throat. He couldn't help but move. Could it be that he had unknowingly been affected by the fantasy monarch giant spirit flame's illusory realm again? The star cauldron is the core of this stone cauldron. There's still some time left. Try and see if you can open it. After a long moment, the star sky tablet opened its mouth and pointed toward the enormous star cauldron. Open the star cauldron. Xiao Yan, who had regained his senses, let out a bitter laugh. If this was any other time, he would have been eager to open this thing. But now, it's not far from the pill competition. You don't care, but I do. Xiao Yan shook his head and said weakly. It had taken him a month and a half to open a star luo stone cauldron, but now he had to open the star cauldron. God knew how long it would take. Cut the crap. Have you forgotten where you are now? The star luo stone cauldron almost became an ancestral holy weapon. The formation inside is related to time. 1 day in the outside world is equivalent to 1 year in the inside. This amount of time is enough for you to squander. The star sky tablet snorted coldly. It immediately sat cross-legged and said, after opening the star cauldron, you can peacefully stay inside and absorb the fantasy monarch giant spirit flame. I will tell you the rest of the matter at that time. The star sky tablet waved its large hand as it spoke. The old man and Yi Feng's heaven cauldron appeared in front of it. They began to strengthen these 2 heaven cauldrons. Time formation. Xiao Yan involuntarily clicked his tongue in surprise when he heard this. Immediately, his mood became great. He turned his head around and glanced at the fantasy monarch giant spirit flame with lingering fear. A thought passed through his mind and flames surged into his eyes, completely blocking the attack that the former could launch at him at any moment. The reason why he had been struck by the attack earlier was likely because his mood had relaxed after the star sky tablet had spoken to him. The fantasy monarch giant spirit flame on the star cauldron resonated with the latter, maintaining the stability of the stone cauldron's space. Xiao Yan rushed forward and swept his eyes over it. The star cauldron seemed to have undergone a great change in this space within the stone cauldron. The lid of the cauldron seemed to have loosened a little. With the star sky tablet, Xiao Yan no longer had any worries. The origin chi condensed and rushed up to his fists, smashing down with a force that could shatter mountains and rivers. 3 years passed in the blink of an eye. To be precise, it was 3 days in the outside world, and 3 years in the stone cauldron. The star sky tablet appeared to have melted. Within these 3 years, it did not emit a single sound. However, the 2 heaven cauldrons in front of it had quietly undergone a strange change. Compared to before, each of them had a different charm. Above the star cauldron, Xiao Yan licked his dry lips and forced himself to raise his spirits. His eyes swept over and saw that there were a few more cracks on the lid of the star cauldron. For the past 3 years, Xiao Yan had been thinking about what was affecting the star cauldron. Logically speaking, the star cauldron was the heaven cauldron that old man Xing Luo carried with him. How could it allow a monarch cultivation like him to use brute force to break it? Now that he thought about it, it was likely that the star cauldron was within the star luo stone cauldron. Due to the latter's influence, the star cauldron had loosened a little. If the star luo stone cauldron was successfully forged, it would be comparable to an ancestral-level sacred weapon. Just the fantasy monarch giant spirit flame alone did not have the ability to become the axis of the star luo stone cauldron. In that case, the star cauldron was the true core. In these 3 years, Xiao Yan's strength did not increase much. In this place, there was no way to increase his strength. The fantasy monarch giant spirit flame was still suspended above the star cauldron, and he could only rely on his inability to touch it. It was as uncomfortable as it could be. With the star sky tablet opening his mouth, this monarch flame could be said to be something that belonged to him. With the suppression of the 1,000 Leaves ancient monarch fire, the fantasy monarch giant spirit flame's effect on Xiao Yan was very minimal. The pressure between the monarch flames was extremely strong. If not for the encouragement of the Xiao Yi back then, similar to the 3,000 lightning monarch flame, a low-grade monarch flame like the chaos great monarch flame would not have been able to surround the 1,000 Leaves ancient monarch fire. 5 months later, a corner of the star cauldron's lid finally cracked. 3 months later, cracks spread all over the lid. 4 months later, under Xiao Yan's joyful gaze, the lid shattered with a loud bang, turning into sparks of fire that dissipated into the stone cauldron space. It's done. Xiao Yan's spirit was roused. For 4 whole years, he persisted day after day, and finally, it was dawn. Swoosh. The large flaming hand reached out and grabbed the flame of the fantasy monarch giant spirit flame in its palm. Xiao Yan leapt into the spatial zone of the star cauldron. Although he had been fighting for 4 years, his strength hadn't improved at all. He was familiar with all the techniques that he had mastered, and there wasn't the slightest bit of stagnation between the changes. Most importantly, his grasp of the yin-yang fusion origin qi had reached an unimaginable level. The instant Xiao Yan entered the star cauldron, the star sky tablet opened its eyes at the right time. It surveyed the surroundings of the space around the star luo stone cauldron and nodded thoughtfully. A bitter smile surfaced on its cold and stern face. "Old friend, this stone cauldron contains your painstaking effort. I will take it away. In the future, even if I cannot become a true ancestral sacred weapon, I will not let it be buried." In the middle of the star cauldron was another vast and boundless space. Although it wasn't as vast and boundless as the star luo stone cauldron, it was Xiao Yan's first time seeing the environment inside. As the heaven cauldron that old man Xing Luo carried with him, it naturally had an unusual ability. Elder Yi's 5 heaven cauldron could not be compared to it. Back then, he had heard from his teacher that in the current great world, there were no more than 3 7 heaven cauldrons. This star cauldron was likely at least at the level of 7 days. A sacred artifact that was able to form a connection with the power of space had already reached the level of an ancestor-grade sacred artifact. In other words, even if space was created due to the formation within the cauldron, the ability of that star cauldron was already equivalent to a heaven-grade sacred artifact. Even Xiao Yan would not believe that a heaven cauldron of this level could not even reach the level of 7 days. The green-red flame in his hand slowly burned, like a child's tender face. The flame was dreamlike and illusory, bringing with it waves of indescribable mental energy impacts. Flames surged within Xiao Yan's eyes, shaking this impact apart. With the effect of the 1,000 Leaves ancient monarch fire, the fantasy monarch giant spirit flame did not have much of an effect on his mental energy illusion realm. Since this flame can become one of the axis of the star luo stone cauldron, it is likely that it was at its peak back then. By the side, the Xiaoao carefully stared at the fantasy monarch giant spirit flame. It took a long time before it slowly opened its mouth to speak. However, there seems to be only a wisp of flame left now. If I were to devour it now, there would not be any obvious effect in a short period of time. Xiao Yan played with the green-red flame in his hand and nodded thoughtfully. It wasn't difficult for the Xiao Yi to devour the fantasy monarch giant spirit flame now, but its strength wouldn't increase too much after devouring it. It could only be cultivated by the Xiao Yi. If the monarch flame's strength suddenly erupted at the right time, it would undoubtedly give him a headache. "You mean to take it first?" Xiao Yan pondered for a while and looked at the Xiaoao. The fantasy monarch giant spirit flame is a rare flame that can cause damage to one's mind. Do you know what the other flame that can cause damage to one's mind is? After pondering for a moment, the Xiaoao seemed to have thought of something and said softly, "What?" Hearing this, Xiao Yan shook his head. Regarding the monarch flame, moreover, monarch flames were related to 36 types of monarch flames. He had only seen a few of them. It's the 9th-ranked divine illusion ancestral dragon flame. Speaking up to this point, the Xiaoao pursed his lips and said in a deep voice, "The legendary 4 spirits, each of them is related to a type of monarch flame. The monarch flame that is related to the Azure Dragon clan is the divine illusion ancestral dragon flame." Xiao Yan's heart trembled, and his throat seemed to be somewhat dry. This was the first time he had heard of such a thing. Generally speaking, as long as one reaches the level of the heavenly beast, a beast fire will be born within one's body. As for the 4 spirits, as the peak holy beast, the beast fire within their body will undergo a heavy baptism and the natural luck of the world, turning into a monarch flame. Furthermore, their ranking isn't low. As he spoke, it looked at the fantasy monarch giant spirit flame in Xiao Yan's hand. If he hadn't seen this, he wouldn't have remembered the flame that was related to the Azure Dragon clan. However, this flame only has a chance to be born in the body of a descendant with extremely pure 4 spirits bloodline, or an ancestral awakening bloodline that occasionally appears. In my memories, it has never appeared in my clan. Seeing the shock on Xiao Yan's face, the Xiaoao shrugged and said helplessly, "Then, what does it have to do with the fantasy monarch giant spirit flame?" Xiao Yan swallowed his saliva and said with a bitter smile. The fact that this divine illusion ancestral dragon flame was ranked 9th on the monarch flames list was enough to show how powerful it was. How could a flame of this level appear on the body of any direct descendant of the four spirits? The Xiao Ao pursed its lips and lowered its head. It hesitated and no longer spoke. What's wrong with you? If you have anything, just say it. Seeing the Xiao Ao's reaction, Xiao Yan couldn't help but chuckle. This fellow had followed him for so long, but this was the first time he was so bashful. I'm afraid you won't be happy if I tell you. The Xiao Ao bit its lips and muttered to itself. What's wrong? Do you want my life? Xiao Yan smiled and pretended to be angry. Tell me the truth, or I will be really angry. Can you give me the fantasy monarch giant spirit flame and let me devour it? After saying that, the Xiao Ao looked at Xiao Yan nervously. It was afraid that the latter would reveal a trace of displeasure on his face. What Xiao Yan needed to focus on was to continuously devour monarch flames. It also gave him a great increase in strength. After his strength increased, his soul strength would also be strengthened. If he could use the time difference between the Star Luo Stone Cauldron and the outside world to devour the fantasy monarch giant spirit flame before the upcoming pill competition, he would be able to use the time difference between the Star Luo Stone Cauldron and the outside world. It would be an indescribable benefit to the pill competition. Furthermore, Xiao Yan had defeated 2 heavenly sovereign warriors, which had attracted the attention of many big shots. The advancement of his strength was imminent. It was indeed inappropriate for him to ask for the monarch flame now. He heard the Xiao Ao stuttering its words. Xiao Yan was stunned for a moment, then he laughed lightly. Without saying another word, he tossed the green-red flame in his hand to the Xiao Ao. This thing, even if I have it now, it's useless. If it can help you, just take it. Xiao Yan waved his hand generously. This was not the beginning. He had 4 monarch flames, which could be considered rich. Even if he swallowed the fantasy monarch giant spirit flames, he might not be able to use them well before the competition. If he were to suffer the heart flame burning because of this, he would be living a life worse than death. At least for now, he wasn't ready to deal with the heart flame burning. When a monarch cultivation stepped into the heavenly sovereign, it would be a situation of death for the fighting monarch of lower realm. Without sufficient preparation, even he wouldn't dare to step into it. The experience that old ancestor Xiao Tianqing had when dealing with the heart flame burning was very likely to be in the Xiao clan. Now that the matter was settled, it was time for him to go to Xiao Yan and find out what was going on. Speaking of which, if the fantasy monarch giant spirit flame could increase the strength of the Xiao Ao, it was something that he was happy to see. The latter had followed him almost as soon as he arrived in the great world. All these years, he had not been able to help the Xiao Ao much. On the contrary, the Xiao Ao had helped him many times. The relationship between the two of them was far from what a monarch flame could summarize. The Xiao Ao held the green-red flame and opened its mouth. Its expression was complicated. If this thing was placed outside, even heavenly sovereign-level warriors would break their heads and fight for it. Although he had expected that Xiao Yan wouldn't reject it, he had given it to him without saying anything. This trust had warmed his heart. Are you going to devour and refine it here? I'll protect you. Seeing the stunned expression of the Xiao Ao, Xiao Yan patted its head and said with a smile. Now is not the time. Recovering his thoughts, the Xiao Ao stuck out its tongue and looked at Xiao Yan. A trace of a smile flashed across its eyes as it said with a mischievous smile. I also have the Azure Dragon bloodline. If the fantasy monarch giant spirit flame can become a cinch, maybe I can surprise you in the future. Alright, I'll be waiting. Xiao Yan grinned when he heard that. He looked at the star cauldron again and then jumped out. He then took a deep breath of the Xiao Ao. It took a deep breath and moved its palm. No one knew where the fantasy monarch giant spirit flame was stored. Then, it followed Xiao Yan out of the star cauldron. Outside the star cauldron, the star sky tablet sat cross-legged in front of the 2 heaven cauldrons. Ever since he had experienced the great amount of energy from the Star Luo Stone Cauldron, he was now able to walk with his human body. Compared to his previous injuries, he was undoubtedly much better now. He came out so quickly? The Star Sky tablet lifted its eyelids slightly and spoke with an indifferent expression when it sensed Xiao Yan appearing from within the star cauldron. The fantasy monarch giant spirit flame has its own uses. Hearing this, Xiao Yan grinned and glanced at the Xiao Ao beside him. Whatever, the Star Sky Tablet sneered and did not ask any more questions. It was only responsible for helping Xiao Yan find the monarch flame. As for how it worked, it had nothing to do with it. There's not much time left. When are we going out? After casting his gaze at the Star Sky Tablet, Xiao Yan couldn't help but ask. Everything had returned to the main topic. The pill competition was still the most important thing. After such a long time, he still hadn't gotten any of the ingredients needed to refine the medicine pill. Compared to the herbs in the outer world, the herbs in Heaven Medicinal Mountain Range naturally had a different kind of spirituality. This basically prevented the competitors from cheating with the herbs they brought. Although those who could participate in this level of the pill competition were basically all influential figures, and no one would be shameless enough to commit such an act. However, it was also impossible to guarantee that there would be people who would take the risk. 3 months. Seems like there isn't much left. The Star Sky Tablet appeared to be quite leisurely. When he heard this, he said faintly, "Those 2 people outside should have picked quite a number of medicinal herbs. Go out and kill them. Wouldn't there be something left? Those 2 fellows have old man Xing Luo's belongings. Given your temper, you didn't even think about killing them. Why did you try to persuade me instead?" Upon hearing this, Xiao Yan let out a cold snort, his face filled with displeasure. "This is different. Old man Xing Luo is my old friend. Naturally, I won't attack anyone who has his token. But you are different. You aren't familiar with old man Xing Luo, so you won't be able to do anything to him." The Star Sky Tablet narrowed its eyes and grinned. Xiao Yan's expression changed. Just as he was about to speak, the Star Sky Tablet slapped its head again, as if it had thought of something. "No, you and old man Xing Luo have a causality connection, so you can't attack those 2. "What karmic connection?" Xiao Yan frowned. He followed the direction pointed by the Star Sky Tablet and saw that the Star Cauldron was standing steadily behind him like Mount Tai. "You have opened all the Star Cauldrons. What do you think is the cause and effect?" The Star Sky Tablet smiled faintly and stood up abruptly. It seemed like it was muttering to itself. However, its voice resounded beside Xiao Yan's ear, the Star Cauldron of the past. It was the genuine 7 days cauldron. Even if it was severely injured now, its ability to concoct pills was not something that could be compared with a mere 5 days cauldron. This was something that old man Xing Luo left behind. "Don't ruin it in your hands." "Don't destroy it in my hands?" Xiao Yan was stunned for a moment. He didn't have the time to react. He waved his Star Sky Tablet and kept the 2 heaven cauldrons in front of him. He sneered and said, "Don't just stand there and watch. Go out and find the herbs as soon as possible." As soon as it finished speaking, the Star Sky Tablet rushed out first. Only then did Xiao Yan react. He turned his head and looked at the towering Star Cauldron in front of him. A trace of wild joy flashed across his eyes. On the plaza in the valley, the old man and Yi Feng were quietly standing in front of the Star Luo stone cauldron. 4 days passed in the blink of an eye, and their hearts involuntarily became somewhat heavy. The old man felt somewhat restless, and his gaze swept over Yi Feng from time to time. If his Darklight Cauldron was really destroyed, he could only use his means to snatch the latter's Heaven Cauldron. Yi Feng's brows were tightly knitted and he was silent. Compared to the old man, although he was relatively young, he was still over 100 years old. These few days, the occasional glance of the old man caused him to shiver. A trace of danger involuntarily surfaced in his heart. Just as their thoughts were flying about, streams of fiery light suddenly surged out from the Star Luo stone cauldron in front of them. In the next moment, the Star Sky Tablet leapt out. Its cold gaze swept across the 2 of them. With a wave of its hand, the 2 heaven cauldrons fell to the ground with a loud bang. "My luck is not bad. I was lucky and succeeded." The Star Sky Tablet was high up in the sky. As it looked towards the outside of the valley, a trace of a cold smile suddenly appeared on the corner of its mouth. "It succeeded?" Yi Feng was the first to react. He took a step forward and arrived in front of the Dragon Mirror Cauldron. After carefully feeling it, the wild joy on his face could no longer be concealed. Because of his excitement, his entire body started trembling slightly. 5-day cauldron? The old man's expression was extremely calm. He quickly arrived in front of the Darklight Cauldron and gently stroked it with his palm. A trace of surprise flashed across his face. He forcefully endured the trembling of his finger and was about to put the Darklight Cauldron away. "Don't be anxious. I'll borrow your Heaven Cauldron." The Star Sky Tablet reacted quickly, and with a wave of its large hand, it snatched the dark light cauldron up, and played with it in its palm. What's the meaning of this? A trace of anger flashed across the old man's face, but he quickly recovered his calm. The dark light cauldron had already become a 5-day cauldron. He wasn't worried that the Star Sky Tablet would go back on his word. Su! As soon as his voice faded, Xiao Yan rushed out from the Star Luo stone cauldron. The old man's eyes were like a torch as he instantly looked at the former. All he saw was a calm as water, without the slightest fluctuation of emotions. Have you ever heard of people dying for money, birds dying for food? The Star Sky Tablet smiled playfully and looked at Yi Feng. Go back where you came from. There's nothing for you here. After saying that, he beckoned to the old man and said, Go back to where you came from. Follow me. You don't have to worry about other things. Finally, he looked at Xiao Yan and sneered. I don't know how many participants are here. They need medicinal herbs. Do they need to search one by one? As his voice faded, the Star Sky Tablet took large strides forward. The Star Luo stone cauldron below seemed to have a mind of its own. It turned into a fiery light and entered the Star Sky Tablet's body. Xiao Yan was stunned for a moment before following closely behind. The old man's expression was dark and cold, but he could only follow. Watching the few of them leave, Yi Feng was in a trance for a moment, then he reacted. After a moment of silence, he decisively left the place. You want to use this heaven cauldron to attract people? The Star Sky Tablet's speed was not fast. Xiao Yan followed behind and said with a slight frown. When he came to the ruins of the Heavenly Medicine sect, he didn't dare to fly because he was afraid that someone would notice him. Now, he really hoped that someone would find him. He wanted to attract those who weren't afraid of death to come here. Otherwise, you can just kill that old man. The Star Sky Tablet coldly harumphed. Xiao Yan gritted his teeth, but there was nothing he could say. He had wasted too much time in the ruins of the Heavenly Medicine sect. If he didn't do this, it would be impossible for him to collect the required herbs. The old man followed behind the two men. When he heard their conversation, his facial expression changed. He was so angry that he glared at them. After leaving the Heavenly Medicine sect, the Star Sky Tablet stopped and waved the heaven cauldron in its hand towards the ground. At the same time, without his deliberate suppression, the aura of the heaven cauldron gushed out and spread out for thousands of miles in an instant. The rest is up to you. I won't interfere in this kind of thing. With a cold smile, the Star Sky Tablet looked at Xiao Yan. Its body flashed and all of its chi disappeared. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he wouldn't have felt it at all. Woo! The old man's facial expression changed. This bastard was using his heaven cauldron as bait. He simply didn't put the old man in his eyes. However, when he thought of the Star Sky Tablet's strength, he could only grit his teeth and suppress the anger in his heart. Then, he quietly escaped. This old thing. Xiao Yan couldn't stop cursing in his heart. He actually dared to use such a dirty trick. After a long while, there was no one around. Xiao Yan sighed. How could such a low-level trap fall into the trap of these old foxes? Just as Xiao Yan was sighing inwardly, the space beside the dark light cauldron suddenly trembled. In the next moment, a figure rushed out from the spatial zone, heading straight for the dark light cauldron.